Hello, and welcome to Africa's Vision Network. Africa's Vision Network features programs on culture awareness, education, economic empowerment, religion, spirituality, and other issues focusing on the African world. I am Omar Ashaka, your host. The title of our program is Retired Educator Continues to Reach for the Stars. Our program will focus on the career and aspirations of Miss Marlene Fleming Dillon. Miss Fleming Dillon is a native Arlingtonian born near Green Valley, a lifetime member of First Baptist Church in that community located in Rosslyn, Virginia. She's a graduate from Wakefield High School. Her education includes a bachelor's degree from Westchester State College, and I'm assuming that's in Pennsylvania,
Yes.
correct, in music education, and a master's degree in voice from Howard University. She is a dynamic, versatile musician, dramatist, and scriptwriter. We're pleased to have you as our guest. Welcome to Africa's Vision Network,
Thank you for having me.
and you're welcome. Is there anything else you would like to add for the introduction?
Well, I feel humbled by all of the things that have been mentioned. There's nothing to add, just that I am a child of God and I give him all glory and honor for what he's done in my life.
Well, I know our audience is going to be in for a real treat because of your background. The title, Retired Educator Continues to Reach for the Stars, because we know many people when they retire, they think that life is over for them. What role did your family play in developing your talent?
First of all, I want to say I had the most amazing parents. They were examples of what they taught. You know how people can say something, but they don't necessarily walk the talk? My parents were examples of what they tried to have myself and my three other siblings do. So I was just raised with a good moral character, good guidance. Um, from the time I could remember, I was in church. So God, the Bible, Sunday school, singing in choirs was all a part of my life. I was raised with moral guidance and knowing right from wrong. That was established at the beginning of my life.
Mhm.
So my family played a great role in just establishing the person I am today, my character. Music was a big part in my family. My father sang in a church
Mhm.
choir. I had a cousin, Annabelle Strayhorn, who was a trained vocalist. My sisters played piano. I came from a family where there was a host of musicians. My father's sister also played for the church at one time.
Mhm.
So music kind of sucked me in, and I was interested from just watching them.
Okay.
Um, I was actually supposed to be the dancer. What
Okay.
happened, my sisters, Rachel and Velma, they were given piano lessons. And at that time, they were $3. Not going to have happen today, but they were $3 at that time. And my mother said, well, we're going to have her to be the dancer. So I
Mhm.
took dance lessons. I think they might have lasted for 6 months. And then my mom said, you know, why don't we just have Velma, which is one of my sisters, said, let's have her give Marlene piano lessons. And Velma was a very tough teacher, very stern, and that didn't work out very well. So I ended up going to their piano teacher. So all three of us would go. I believe it was Thursday nights. We would go and have our piano lesson. Um, my sister Rachel eventually ended up playing for the Sunday school
Mhm.
at church and the youth choir. So music was kind of something that we were just kind of wrapped in, and I'm not sure whether I thought about being a musician at that stage of the game. I started taking piano lessons, I guess, at 11.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, that's quite a bit of information. Um, as a child, do you remember maybe how old you were when you first became interested in music? And we're going to, so our audience, especially the young children who might have an appetite for music, do you remember how old you were when you first thought, okay, I believe this is what I want to do?
I started to I observed our youth choir at church, and I believe I joined church just because I wanted to sing in the youth choir, and I was about 8 at that time.
Okay.
Um, I remember watching the choir, watching soloists, and watching musicians play and being fascinated at how they could do that. I would say that my interest in music as a career, I want to say 13 to 14 years of age is when I really said to myself, I think I want to be a teacher. I think the teacher part was first
Mhm.
because I used to play teacher. You know, you play school, and I was taking piano lessons, and the two met.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this too, Marlene. Off camera, we were talking about, I told you, you made me think of Whitney Houston, someone who, as we all know, grew up in the church. And it was fascinating to hear you talk about your parents, how they really grounded you spiritually. And it's kind of amazing that journey. Seems like you have not strayed from that. What was the one something that you can remember that allowed you to stay so focused and get to this point in your life, especially when we look at artists such as Whitney Houston?
I think having consistent parents, they were very consistent. They were not wishy-washy. That was part of it. Now, I will admit, when I went away to college, and I strayed a little bit because I wasn't going to church every Sunday,
Okay.
and like most college students, you get involved in the parties, and a little bit of your the upbringing goes a little bit
Hmm.
somewhat on the back burner. But then, because that was such a strong foundation in my life, I was pulled back to that.
Hmm.
So um, it was one of the kinds of things where um, it was a magnet there. My
Hmm.
parents really established such a foundation that I was just always tapped into it.
Okay. Even in straying away, that was probably something you needed, though, right? Don't you think that?
I I think so,
Right. Okay.
because then you find out that the grass is not necessarily greener on the other side.
Okay.
You know, when you try something different, you're like, well, it's better the way it
Okay.
was at first.
I'm curious too. Genetically speaking, I mean, musicians are always very different and very unique. Um, and you talk about God, your relationship with God. Do you think God kind of appoints individuals to be in certain roles, like musicians, for example?
Absolutely. It was interesting because when I went to college and I was in Westchester, I was majoring in music education, and I felt that the training, yes, gave me the tools I needed, and of course the paperwork I needed to be a teacher. But I think I was born a teacher. I think you're born. I think you have. It's ordained in you when you're born what you're to be. You have that destiny.
Hmm.
Now, there will be different distractions along your life to try to sidetrack that destiny. But everyone has a destiny that's for good. But the object of the demonic one is to sidetrack you from reaching that destiny that you have. So I felt, now that I look back in hindsight on my life, I know I know for sure, I absolutely am 1,000% sure that the career I had was where I was supposed to go.
Another interesting point. Now, for our young people who might be watching us, Marlene, in particular those who may not have those kind of parents that you had, and you're an educator, how does a single parent, how do teachers, how do they identify this ordained mission of some of their students or some of their kids,
I
in your opinion?
find the main thing that a teacher can be and a parent is to be a very good role model first, because kids are always watching. I had the most interesting thing said to me by a second grade student once. He said, "You're always the same. When I come to your classroom, you're always the same." They notice consistent. Are you the are you saying one thing and doing something different? So the best thing you can do is not what you tell a kid to do, but how you live, and they're watching, and that's a big lesson, a big sermon that you preach through your behavior.
Now, you speak of consistency, and that's interesting. Sounds like you went to class every day, you were the same. Was that because of who you are and what you love doing? I mean, because that sounds like a tough job to do that.
Well, let me put it this way, you don't always feel the same, but you
Okay.
have to behave the same. We have ups, we have downs, we have good days, we have bad days. But I have to remember that the God we serve is a consistent God. And you know that everything in life is going to always come out for the better. So therefore, you don't have, well, I'm feeling bad today, I'm going to be mean to people. Oh, I had a good day, I'm going to be nice. No, consistency, because people are watching. They're watching how you behave in the ups and in the downs. So that is the best impression you can give to a child. That is what encourages them. They're just watching your behavior. I know in school when I would have to discipline or go through different situations, the kids were watching to see how I handle it. They're just watching. And that their inspiration will come from that, or their disappointment will come
Okay.
from that.
I'm curious, did you grade Marlene based on your reaction to a particular situation in the school setting? Do you go home, okay, well, Marlene, I did well or what?
Always self-evaluate.
Okay.
I would go home and say, no, you know what? Sometimes hindsight is 2020. I would say, maybe I should have reacted this way to that situation, because you get back and you have time to think. Sometimes situations come to you so fast, and you don't have that 15 minutes to ponder what to say or what to do. You have to be right on it, and then later on you say, did I say the right thing? Did I do the right thing? Usually you'll have a confirmation whether you said the right thing or reacted the right way. If you didn't, then you evaluate. You have to be honest with yourself and say, I shouldn't have said that or I shouldn't have done that. So the next time I'm going to do better.
Okay. Marlene, this might be a good time for another question that I have. Can you discuss some of the high points and low points in your career, especially maybe some of those low points in terms of how you dealt with that and moved forward?
The low points in my career, when I first went to Westchester, the first 2 or 3 weeks, it just seemed, I guess my expectations of what majoring in music was going to be, I was thinking you're just going to sing and play the piano all day. And when I realized that you had all these different subjects and things that you had to take, I remember having a conversation with my mother and saying, Mom, I'm not sure I'm going to make it. Um, that was me feeling really shaky about, you're at the bottom of the mountain and you're looking up at the mountain thinking, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to climb this. I know I want to get to the top, but I'm not sure I have it within me. But you don't stop. You just try. That's the key word. You try anyway. Because if you don't try, you know you're not going to make it.
I'm sorry, but were your mother's words the strength that you needed to keep trying, or just
My mother was one of those types that believed in when a task becomes hard, you get hard with it.
okay?
That's what they believed. So it was, you just try to do your best,
Right.
and you just don't say, okay, I throw in the towel, but that was one low point. But when I got into my teaching career, um, I will say this, I had an amazingly outstanding teaching career. I could see how just God worked with me. The lowest point in my teaching career, I started having problems with my voice in 1999, where I just kept losing my voice. I had surgery, and I thought everything was on the up and up. I was out of teaching for about 4 weeks. A year later, it came back, and I could barely talk at the end of the day. So I went to several doctors, and one doctor said to me, what's your age? I told him my age. He said, have you thought about early retirement? Because I couldn't effectively, it was hard to effectively teach the kids. I couldn't sing the parts to them. Fortunately, I could play, so I would play what they needed to hear. I had a second surgery, and the second surgery actually addressed the initial problem. And I was out of work for about 3 months. I came back, and I went to vocal therapy. And I really, at one point, didn't think I would ever be able to even sing at all. And slowly, over the years, my voice regained its strength. So that was a low point, because I really felt that I wasn't going to be able to finish my career, but I did.
Interesting. Two surgeries, Marlene. Did you want the surgery because of your love of music? You wanted to be teaching, or did you have to have the surgery, or was it just what were the
I
reasons?
thought it would, the first surgery, I thought would address the problem. They told me, the doctor said you have a vocal node, and we'll take care of the node in on your vocal cord. And initially, after it was over, the surgery was over, and I rest for 2 or 3 weeks. The voice was fine, but it really didn't deal with the situation. Um, I felt that I actually did the surgery thinking the second surgery, I almost had no choice. It was
Okay.
either try this surgery, or do you want to continuously try to go into the classroom in your horse? You really can't. You're basically have no voice to teach. So it was try the second surgery or look into getting out of teaching and going into something else.
Okay, and real quick for those music students, especially voice students, was there anything particular that you did to create that node you said on your vocal cord?
I believe so.
Okay.
I, you get to the point where you're constantly trying to get ready for programs or get the kids ready for concerts. And usually around November and December, you're preparing for your winter concerts, your Christmas concerts. So you're hammering away. When you're sick, you still teach, you're still singing. You're not staying home because you're trying to, you have a timeline, and this program has to be ready at a certain date. And so you're pushing yourself, you're not feeling well, you're not healthy, and the strain on the vocal cords. They found with the second surgery that it was a vocal pore that had become clogged. So with laser surgery, they took care of that. But I asked the doctor, I said, what happened? He said, probably you got a cold, you got sick, and you just kept teaching, kept working, kept pushing yourself.
Okay.
And it just strained the vocal cords like that.
Excuse me. So it sounds like pacing oneself is very important.
Very.
Let me ask you this, Marlene. I mean, you're very energetic, vibrant. You could have probably gone a different route with your career. Whitney Houston, maybe Hollywood, uh, Broadway, etc. Any regrets in not going after and you still probably have the fame and the riches and all that, but any regrets in maybe taking a different route with your abilities?
If you had asked me that maybe 20 years ago, I might have said yes. At a point in there, people are thinking, well, if you are a music major, you should become a performer. In fact, when we were deciding on, in college, we were deciding on your major, whether you're going to be a music ed major or music performance major, they marketed it like this. They said, well, for those of you that want to be a performer, you major in music performance. And for those of you that want to be performers, but you may not think that you can get a performance job right away, you can do teaching as a backup. They kind of market teaching as a backup. So a lot of teachers are teaching and they feel they're waiting. I'm saying music teachers, and they're waiting for that career to take off. I was at that point where I'm looking at music as the backup, and teaching is just something I'm doing. I love teaching, but boy, if I could get a performing job or something, if that could take off. But when I look back in hindsight, I would not want to be a performer. I would not trade any of my teaching years. First of all, there's a lot of pressure in performance. Number two, in teaching, I was able to make performers, the kids, into performers. I had a lot of performers. Instead of me being the performer, I was training them to perform. And I was able to see the growth and the development, and how some of the students I worked with, how they became great performers. So in a way, I was still performing, but I was teaching performing. I'm not sure that I was ready to deal with the pressures of being a performer, traveling. It's a certain pressure you get when you know it's time to go on stage. It's a certain something that goes down inside of you. I admire performers. Many times I can be at a performance and I'm nervous for the person on stage. I'm sitting there and I'm feeling what they're going through, the butterflies right before they start to sing or play their instrument or whatever they're going to do. I look back and I say that it really wasn't for me.
Okay. And that must make you feel good knowing that you made the right choice.
I think so.
You mentioned performers that you admire. Can you share with our audience a few of the musicians or performers that you truly enjoyed, and maybe even patterned yourself after?
One of my one of my role model performers when I was in college, and you're singing the operatic arias and different things. Leontine Price. I would go down into the library in college and pull out records. We didn't have CDs at that time, and listen to her sing something. So that my voice teacher signed me a piece. I'd have to listen to Leontine Price sing that first. So she was one of my. I would say she's at the top of my list because I have a love for classical music. When it comes to gospel and sacred music, I love Richard Smallwood's music. Absolutely love his music. I love Kurt Carr's singers. I've always admired, of course, Whitney Houston, Patti LaBelle.
That's interesting. And which part of Patti LaBelle, the gospel side or the
Actually, the rhythm and blues.
okay.
Yeah. And a lot of people not familiar with this artist, Minnie Riperton,
Yeah.
to be able to sing those high notes like that.
Right. Unfortunately, and she passed away rather quickly.
Many years ago.
Let me ask you about one that I used to listen while my mother was listening to her, Mahalia Jackson.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about when you hear her music? How does it make you feel? What are your thoughts?
I admire Mahalia Jackson. One thing people don't realize is that she not only sang gospel music, there's a few recordings of her doing classical pieces as well. So she was wide girth. She was just known for the gospel, but she had a very wide range of genre of music. So yes, I think she opened the door for gospel music. I think she's one of those forerunners that if you're singing gospel, you have to definitely have hats off to Mahalia Jackson.
Okay. My daughter Zora, she did her African American history project on Mahalia Jackson, and doing some research, I was surprised to hear and see so many people were trying to push her into the nightclub, but she refused to budge on that. So I thought that was fascinating as well. Let me ask you this. I see a lot of musicians playing we're in the Washington, D.C. area. I see a lot of musicians playing in the metro. And some look like they're on a stage. I mean, I've seen ladies playing the cello, and she looks like she's performing at the Kennedy Center or something. Some people say musicians are having a tough time when it comes to getting paid. I've heard parents say, well, I don't want my child to study music. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel they have to, again, think about what is the child's destiny. Because whatever the destiny is, those doors will open for them. If the kid is meant to be a performer, the doors will open for them to make it in the world of performance. If it's meant for the child to, and sometimes, it may be a delayed entry into that field, but if they're passionate about that, now of course you have to eat, you have to make money to take care of yourself, but if you're passionate, you don't want to give up on your dream. There should be something on the inside of you that confirms where you're supposed to be in the direction you take. Maybe youngsters may not get it at the age of 12 or 14 or 16, but somewhere in your life it'll start to click in. This is my destiny. You'll have signs, you'll have confirmation to let you know, aha, this is where I'm supposed to go. And the doors will opportunity will magically open for you.
I mean, I love what you're saying. It sounds like maybe you need to write your book.
Oh, no.
Well, look, Marlene, but with parents, I mean, I worked over at Howard University for a while, and I was in the loan section, but I dealt with a lot of the doctors. And I was amazed. I found a lot of those doctors really didn't want to be doctors. They were studying medicine because their parents wanted them to be doctors. So you mentioned, a child or a student being passionate about something. Do we really hear a lot of parents talking about, okay, Zora or Sarah, what are you passionate about? So and I think you bring up a great point. As an educator, how do we pump into that scenario, if you will, the passionate consideration? Because, again, I'm basing it on my experience, what I saw with the students in Howard. Being passionate is not what a lot of parents was concerned about. They're concerned about what kind of job you're going to get once you graduate. And then you had those who couldn't wait to say, well, my son or daughter's a doctor. So I think you hit on a very interesting point when you talk about the passionate feeling of the student.
I think as parents, and I know I'm a little guilty of this with my two daughters, sometimes you want to choreograph their career. We want you to be this, we want you to be that, because we're looking out for their good. The best thing a parent can do is notice what the child is interested in. And I can give you two case scenarios. One of my students, he's an excellent drummer, but the mother said at age 5, he said, you know, Mom, I'm interested in the drums. What she did, she took that seriously, and he got drum lessons. He studied with someone that played with the National Symphony, and he became an outstanding drummer because she tapped into his interest. Another thing, I remember with my husband, he was saying that his father was a lawyer, and his father wanted him to be a lawyer. And with my husband, it wasn't happening. He wasn't interested in that. He was interested in driving tractor trailers. And when I see my husband, there are times I'm out on the road with him.
Mhm.
He's an excellent tractor trailer
Right.
driver. That's his passion. He loves it. So sometimes when you try to push someone into something that's not their passion, it's like taking a square and putting it into a circle. You know, it's not going to fit. It's not their destiny.
Right.
And they're going to be unhappy. Yeah, they might become the doctor. They might be working at Howard University Hospital, and they have the MD, but are they content? Do they feel fulfilled? Or are they still looking for that thing out there that's really them? They're going to feel incomplete because they're doing something that, yeah, it puts the milk on the table,
Mhm.
it pays the mortgage, but it's not fulfilling their destiny. And I think there's something inside of us that says, you know what? That's not where you're supposed to be, but I'll just hang out here because I'm making good money. So you want to make sure somewhere between the cradle and the grave that you fulfill what your destiny is.
Well, one thing about it, it sounds like with that formula, especially with parents, your spouse or significant other, you have to really be in tune with that other person, and you can't be selfish with your thinking. Because look, let's face it. You talked about your husband. Parent wanted him to be a lawyer. He wanted to be a truck driver. Big gap there. And I remind me of a friend of mine who was going to go in ROTC as an officer, but he chose not to go. Truck driver. And I went out with him a couple times, and it was pretty fascinating. But sometimes parents don't receive that too well. Whether it's working at McDonald's or because some people that's what they want to do. But I think what you underscore here is so important that we have to take in consideration the destiny of that particular individual. And I just don't know, Marlene, if a lot of parents and even educators are really looking at that piece. So you bring up a very interesting point. So again, with your energy, becoming an actress, from what I understand, that was on your menu of things to consider for your life. Tell us a little bit about that.
I started getting involved in theater when I was in high school. And I was involved in, of course, the choirs at Wakefield. They had a gospel choir, I was in that. I was in the Wakefield Choir, which was the big choir. And then I was in we called the Wakefield Singers, which was a small select group. I always just like clowning it up sometime. So they had these auditions for Hello Dolly. And someone must have said to me, I think it'd be good to try out for that role, to audition. So they had auditions, and you had to do a little singing thing and a little acting thing. And they had to see what your dancing ability was like. So I made the role of Dolly. That particular year, they had double casts. They had two casts. So I was Dolly in one cast, and there was another Dolly in another cast. I loved theater so much, and I had a wonderful theater teacher, Mr. Boyd. He was just amazing. I loved it so much, and that the next year I also got involved in the school musical Promises, Promises. So because of me getting involved in theater at school, I was involved in the choirs, but I was involved in theater. They knew me more in high school for what I did in theater. And so they really thought I was going to major in theater. And I, again, I was looking at, I was being pulled in both
Hmm.
directions, but something maybe because of my family's background, we have a lot of, music was the stronger element. Something said, okay, you're going to go and you're going to major in music. This is what you're going to do. And at the time that I went to Westchester, it was no doubt that it's not that it's going to be music. There was no doubt on that. It wasn't anything of, yeah, maybe theater. Should you change your mind? No, I
Hmm.
never rethought the process the whole time I was there. But on the side, I've always just wanting to do, just enjoy doing theater on the side.
So is that something we might flip on our TV one day and see Marlene doing some acting?
I wouldn't mind. I don't know what roles they would give me at this stage of the game, but I wouldn't mind.
Well, I got to admit, let me plug Africa's Vision Network. Maybe some agent is out there watching right now and might give you a call. So,
I'd probably have to play the mother role or something.
well, I want to go back though. I was curious. Is there? You mentioned classical music, and sometimes that's kind of new. I mentioned to you Al Johnson, who unfortunately recently passed, uh, was from my hometown, Newport News. I saw him in a talent show, and he was playing a classical piece, and the audience wasn't ready, and he got really upset. But how do you go about as a musician? How did you go about selecting maybe doing classical pieces, maybe verses, R&B or blues or whatever?
There were two kinds of music that I just gravitated to. It was going to be sacred because that's what, being in church, hymns, spirituals, anthems, gospels. That was one area of music, and the other was classical. Now, the cousin, and she was classically trained, and just as a girl watching her do recitals and hit those high notes to me was fascinating. I was fascinated, and I looked at the discipline that was required to be a classical singer. I would watch classical pianists and watch their fingers and look at the discipline required to play.
And I'm sorry,
um,
Marlene. uh,
mhm.
So are you saying the discipline is different for different genres of music?
I find that if you're going to be, and I have to say the discipline is somewhat different, seeing that now I played gospel, I played classical, and of course, different things I've had to play in the process of teaching. I find that when I'm performing, singing, or playing gospel music, I have a little bit more wiggle room in what I'm doing. I can improvise here, there. When I went to college and I was majoring in voice, and of course, they give you operatic arias to do. I tried to employ a little bit of that wiggle room in those operatic arias, and the teacher was like, it's very precise. It's very precise and it's very exact. So, what you see on that page, you have to play what's on that page or sing what's on that page. Now, when I'm playing a gospel piece, I may play it one way one day. The next day, I may decide, I want to play it this way. I'm going to add these extra notes. With classical pieces, if I'm going to play Beethoven's Pathetic Sonata, I'm going to play it the way it's on that sheet music today, tomorrow, and next week.
Is that tough though, in in terms of preventing you from being creative, or because you're in classical music, you know what's expected, so that's where the discipline comes in?
It's what's expected, so you know the discipline comes in there. What I found with many of our gospel musicians, and there's some fantastic gospel musicians out there. I mean, amazing pianists, organists, singers, etc. But I run into numerous gospel musicians, keyboard players that don't read. And some of them are
You mean
fast.
music?
They don't read music. They don't
Okay.
read sheet music. You
Hmm.
put something in front of them, they're not readers. They may be able to read. They'll know maybe that's a middle C and that's an E. But if you put something in front of them, can they really play it? And many of them can't. And many of them said they started out um, as kids taking piano lessons, but that discipline of sitting there and maybe deciphering the code of the notes,
Okay.
they found it easier just to, okay, forget the sheet music. Let me just start to just play it. A hymn, for example, a hymn like What a Friend We Have in Jesus. You could put a book up in front of someone and say, play what's written there. A person that reads can play what's written there, but they can also, if they have the ability to play by ear or to improvise, they can still play the same piece and add to it, but they have two abilities going on. They're able to improvise on that piece, but they're able to read. Now, a person that can't read, they are very limited. They can be very creative, but they can only play what's in their head and what they hear. If it's written down, I've been in situations where musicians that can't read, somebody has gone to them and put some sheet music in front of them, and they've just had to look at it and they just couldn't play it. And these are musicians that if they spent time learning to read, they would be above awesome because they have the technique, they have the ability. It's just that they didn't want to spend the time, and it takes discipline to learn to read notes. That's for sure.
With your background as a musician, can you, if you go to a performance concert, can you pick up whether or not the conductor, whoever's directing the music, is maybe someone who can read music or someone who can't? Can you hear something different? Or
Usually when I go to a concert, usually if the conductor, if he has a sheet music there, you know that he's reading. You know that he or she is reading. Usually I can tell, even with gospel groups, whether the musician or the conductor is trained. When I say, you use the word trained, whether they are trained by the way they conduct the choir. In other words, are they employing techniques such as balance between the vocal parts? There are certain things that makes a choir good, and so they have to have balance. Are they employing diction from their choir, the words? Are they employing that the choir has interpretation of the song, loud, soft, crescendos? A good choir director is directing the choir so that all those elements come out. But if you see someone waving their hands and the diction is poor, everything is the same volume, there's no interpretation to the music, you know, okay, they're just waving their hands.
well, I was gonna say, as someone who doesn't have any background in music, so more movement by the conductor, is that someone who's really involved and really controlling the band or the choir, or not necessarily?
More hand movement? Not necessarily.
Okay.
It's not so much more hand movement, it's making sure that your hand movement is communicating to the choir what you want. So when a person moves their hands, it's a choir reacting. If the person is doing, usually if a choir director does this, they want them to soften. Or if you're conducting, the smaller movements mean soft. When they move and they start to make the movements bigger, that means they want a louder sound. So a bunch of movement, you know, you see some choir directors and they just really do some fancy things.
Right.
Some of that could be for show. As long as the choir director is communicating to the choir, and they basically, you want to have the choir in your hand. You want to make sure that you do this, the choir knows what to do, and you're controlling the choir with your hands. And you're doing a bunch of hand movement, and you see no difference in the sound of the choir. They're doing whatever they want to do. Then the choir director is detached from the choir.
And I guess that's one reason why it's important to go to rehearsal.
Absolutely.
Well, Marlene, because time is moving on, let me ask you this. I want to ask you your experience with the audience. We had a gentleman on here, Mr. Ray Kurt Johnson, a violinist, and he plays a lot at the Metro. But he was telling me once he was playing a piece, and this gentleman was coming up the escalator, and the gentleman was just crying. And Ray Kurt was saying he didn't know why he was crying, but he said he came up there, you know, I used to hear that with my mommy and all that kind of stuff. So the emotions that music bring out in people, tell us, what do you recall your most memorable experience where you know for a fact you impacted someone in your audience?
I know when you're dealing with church, in a church atmosphere, you know you're impacting the congregation by maybe they may wave their hand, they may smile. Depending on the song, there may be a tear coming down. They may, if it's a fast song, they may stand up. You can tell just from the reaction of the congregation. Now, outside of a church setting, once I took my choir, my elementary choir, to sing. They sang at a church, and we were singing Joyful, Joyful from Sister Act. And the young man that was doing the lead, who had the most amazing voice, he started off singing the solo, and the audience, the way they reacted after he sang three notes, and they just reacted almost as if the ceiling was lifted. I actually turned around and looked because they were in such amazement. Usually, if an audience is receiving your piece well, they'll show it through some form of, it could be just a smile, a heavy applause at the end, maybe an applause and a standing ovation at the end. Sometimes they won't want to let the song go. So I see this happen in church from time to time. The song is over and people are still clapping, they're still waving hands. So sometimes we have to go back and give them a little bit more of the song. But those songs, first of all, directors of choirs, whether it's school or church or college or community choirs, need to be very cognizant about what they select for the choirs to sing anyway. You have to ask yourself, what is this? How is this going to be received? Are people going to be touched by this? Are they going to enjoy this piece? You have to be very selective with what, you just don't grab anything and give to your choir to sing.
But how do you go about, what do you kind of assess the audience that you're going to be performing before, or how do you go about getting the right piece for the right audience?
Well, depending on what the occasion is, if we're looking at our repertoire, our already learned repertoire, I'll look at the occasion. You also look at the pieces. Every choir has what they call their hot pieces, or the pieces they do really well. So you look at the occasion, you look at the pieces you're doing, and you fit it into that. If it's a brand new piece you're working on that you've never done before, and you're trying to select new music for an occasion, that's when sometimes you have to pray about it. You really have to give it thought. It's not anything that you just make, it's not a haphazard decision when you're selecting music.
Okay. Now, I don't know if this ties in, what you're saying ties into the term music therapy. It was just something I thought about when I knew I was going to be doing the show with you. I mean, when I ride the train, I'm going to work. I mean, everybody now, they're plugged up, listening, I'm assuming, to some kind of music. In your training, have you been involved with music therapy? And I looked it up on Google, and it's not, whoever this author was made it clear, it's not just playing music. It's, you're trained. Can you comment on that?
On music therapy, that was a major, when I was coming along in college, they were just starting to groom that major in colleges. I think all music is therapy, because if you've had a bad day, you put on something. You've had a good day, you may want to celebrate. Music can lift the spirit. It can sometimes calm. Certain music is just calming. So music in general is therapeutic. Now, of course, when people study music therapy, they'll use it for, people that have certain situations and certain things they're having them to do to deal with the disorder that's at hand. But music in itself is therapeutic. That's another reason why you have to be very careful what you select to sing or to play for your audience, because you're really giving. Music is, you're just giving, and it needs to be received by the person's spirit, because you can sing as beautifully as you want. You could hit all the right notes, and if the audience is not receptive to that, they'll sit there and be untouched. But yet you sang well.
If you see the audience responding that way, how do you deal with that?
Well, you say to yourself, you try to figure out, is it the audience? Are they just cold today? And some people, for example, my mother would be the type, no matter how great the music would be in church, she's not going to stand up and wave her arms. She wasn't that kind of a person. But she would say to you afterwards, I really love that piece. So if you're doing a song and it didn't seem like it was received the way you thought, you evaluate, okay, was it an audience issue maybe? Did I select the wrong piece? Was it just a piece they didn't feel? As the people say, they weren't feeling it. Or maybe was our performance of it? Were we well rehearsed? because you can have a great song and you just didn't rehearse it and you didn't prepare it right.
Let me ask you this, because I know you have a very long career with music. You talked about all music is music therapy. Let's talk briefly about hip hop. Um, I mean, we hear folks who might be at the light. Uh, do you still stand by? Is hip hop music therapy?
I think what hip hop does, it's good for half the time I can't understand the words. So I can't speak too much about the lyrics because you can't understand them most of the time. But I think it's recreational music. I think for a lot of our young people, it's that beat, and it can be a physical release. You're moving to the beat, and so they get in love. They fall in love with the beat of hip hop music. Dance, they can dance to it. Um, so it's therapeutic in that way. I know my daughter enjoys listening to that. I'm not particularly one that would, but I feel it serves a purpose. I feel it serves a purpose for the generation that's listening to it. They probably feel it's an outlet of some type.
That's a very, very that's a very interesting response. Um, but does music impact, what is it, the endorphins are released or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that um, in terms of, what your background and
What I say, music calms a savage beast, and that is so true. Um, I find that they were saying, for example, if you listen to Mozart before you take standardized tests such as math, that you'll score better. So there was a couple of teachers at the one elementary school I was working at before. This was in Virginia. Before they were doing the SOLs, they would play some Mozart because they felt that it was releasing certain things in the brain to help kids perform better. I find that when I listen to music, it with me it's not just listening. Sometimes I have to sit down and play. Sometimes I find I sit down and actually will start to play, and I'm calm
okay.
and relaxed.
Well, Marlene, time has gone by,
Oh my!
and this has been great. And look, by the way, real quick note: the more I look at you, you look like a young Patti LaBelle too, though, in terms of the eyes and all that. Because I tried to get a job with Patti LaBelle once. But look, we're going to take a break. We're going to let you come back and perform your Hello Dolly piece. But is there anything you want to leave with the audience? I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, I would say to uh, young people, I'm passionate about young people, and that they would need to constantly try. Just don't get to the point where you become complacent. Don't settle for mediocrity. The problem I'm seeing with young people today, don't get to the point where, well, it's okay. Try to always take your talents, your abilities to another level. I have discovered things about myself simply through trying,
Okay.
just because I tried. A challenge. I think a lot of people are afraid of a challenge. What they have to realize, and one Bible verse I live by, is that if you seek God, if you seek Him, He'll be there for you. That you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. So through His strength, He will help you reach your destiny. But just don't settle for mediocrity.
Well, Marlene, I wish we had another hour because you're bringing out some very powerful points. So I want to say God bless you in your future endeavors, and we're going to get ready to give our audience a feature performance of Hello Dolly. But thank you very much for coming on Africa's Vision Network.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having
you
me. I enjoyed myself.
Great. You're certainly welcome.